Good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to the second March 2021 meeting of the OpenZFS leadership team. We have a couple of exciting items on the agenda, and then probably some time for off-agenda discussions if folks have ideas. So why don't we kick it off with Brian? Do you want to talk about the version numbering stuff?
Sure. This is something that came up a few months ago, I would say, and we're going to talk about it, but basically nailing down what the version numbers mean in OpenZFS. And I would say what I'm going to propose is something that we've basically been doing this whole time, so it's not really a change. But basically, we just use the major minor patch scheme that is pretty commonly used everywhere. The major number would basically be incremented at our discretion, I would say. When a noteworthy feature comes into OpenZFS or we have some other reason to bump the major number, we could do that. Otherwise, we would just bump the minor number for major new features or new properties, new feature flags, new command line options, that kind of thing. So that's consistent with what we said to date, where we put out a 2.1 release, which would include some new features. So that would be DRAID and the pool compatibility stuff, that kind of thing. And then the third digit is just bug fixes, right? So nothing exotic there, nothing that breaks anything. It's compatible. We try to minimize the disruption there. So we might bump it for kernel compatibility patches and whatnot, but I think that's all pretty consistent with what we've done to date with all the OpenZFS releases before. So that's the kind of the high level view of what the digits would mean, and I think it's pretty normal. I can put something up on the website or in an issue or somewhere, and we can comment on it and refine it a little bit more, but that's the general idea. I guess I should stop there and see if anybody's got any concerns, questions.
Just to kind of map that onto what we've been doing, in the ODOT whatever scheme. So basically, like the roughly annual sort of big releases would be either a major or minor bump, depending on kind of our discretion of like, is this really super noteworthy year, or is it just a kind of regular everyday year? And then the patch releases would be the releases that go out like every couple of months with, like you said, bug fixes and support for new kernel versions.
Yeah, that would be the idea. I mean, in my thinking, that makes sense because the major version, VFS should always be compatible, right? That's kind of the big takeaway from this. Like bumping the major version would indicate some kind of major incompatibility, and that's not something we ever really want to do with ZFS. So
yeah. We can choose a new name then.
Yeah, like if I were to see a major version bump, I might think that it would be completely incompatible. Oh no, OpenZFS 3.0 is incompatible with 2.0, right? That's never going to be the case, right? We never want that to be the case. So that's kind of where some of the thinking comes from there. But we can bump it if we add something new, like support for a new platform or something like that might be noteworthy enough. Like we now support Windows. All right, it's a 3.0 release. Great.
Yeah, or some kind of major new feature that would be notable for, either for lots of members of the community or, some major use cases.
Sure.
Right. I think that, when you talk about incompatibility, there is potentially on that note, a certain possibility for incompatibility. If you add support for a new platform that didn't exist before that version, that is a form of incompatibility for that particular platform. They can't go to 2.0. Windows would be 3.0 and onward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true of all new features, right?
Right.
Like, you add device removal, and maybe that's just a minor version bump, but you can't do it on older versions. So
that's true.
Any new features would be at least a minor version bump, right?
Yeah.
Have we thought about using the version number to manage the support lifecycle or whatever? I know that's something we talked about with the problem with having 2.1 and 2.2 is, which ones do we support and for how long? And does it make sense to use the the major version number or incrementing it kind of on a somewhat of a schedule like yearly or whatever, to make it easy to say, you know, all the version 2.x ones will go out of support at the end of this year or whatever.
Yeah, so we're thinking about that as well. What I would suggest for that is we do something like a long-term release and then a more rolling, not rolling release, but our normal annual releases, right? What I would suggest is we have a long-term branch and we just designate one of the tags. Could be 2.0, could be 2.1, could be whatever as a long-term release. And we guarantee that we'll just apply bug fixes to that for a year, 2 years, 3 years. We'll have to pick a duration, right? But something reasonable that distributions could pick up and be able to track and know that they're going to get important bug fixes for. But I would say what we would exclude from that would be things like new kernel compatibility changes or no new major features or anything like that, right? So you could draw a line in the sand about what's going in here and what isn't, because some of those changes are really disruptive. And anybody who's running a long-term release doesn't really want that probably. So I would say that would be the conservative approach. And then we can have a normal release like we've been doing to date, basically, that comes out every, 6 to 12 months, whatever, something on that cadence, like we've been doing, maybe annually. And that will just be the latest release. And we will support that until a new one of those comes out in 6 to 12 months or whatever. So we would only have 2 releases we ever support, this long-term release and whatever the latest thing is.
And I think the goal is that the number of bug fixes that go into the long-term release would be extremely small, because at least when it's in the long-term kind of once it's no longer the current release and it's just being maintained for long-term compatibility, it would be like critical bug fixes only. Something that's like obviously like anything that could risk data corruption, that would be definitely in the long-term releases, but anything else would be a question mark. Yeah. Probably crashes would be like, probably if it's like non-trivial to hit this, then or if it's not too hard to hit this panic, then that's probably a good candidate for backporting to a long-term release. But little stuff that we have put into patch releases before, like we pull a bunch of stuff into patch releases where it's like it's basically zero risk, and we're cutting a release anyways, so we might as well do it. Like fixing typos in the man pages, or even like fixing adding new info to the man pages to make them more clear. It makes sense because there's like no risk. But for the long-term releases, like I don't think that we would do that just because it's like, why put in the work? And we're probably not going to we want to minimize the number of those releases and the amount of change going into them. And if folks want the latest and greatest, then they can get the latest release.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea would be to have those be super stable and low churn. All right, so what's just needed.
I think that makes sense from a point of view of trying to minimize the burden on the release maintainers.
I guess it's also worth mentioning we'd probably only have one long-term release at a time too. I guess we could maybe revisit that after it's been a year or two or whatever, but that would be the initial thinking, is it probably only makes sense to have one, or maybe some window where they overlap for a little bit of time, but not long.
Yeah, I mean, if you had to overlap for 6 months, you might hope that there would be no fixes that come in the 6 months. Hopefully the patch rate for the long-term releases is hopefully it's never, right? The goal should be never, that we never have a fix that's critical enough to warrant a patch on a long-term release.
Right.
And I think historically, maybe we've been running at a rate of not more than 1 a quarter, I would say, maybe 1 a year. Is that your recollection as well? For fixes that are things that we put into patch releases where it's it's actually a critical fix, not a kernel compatibility, not a nice to have because we're here anyways, but yeah, we actually need to get this out ASAP because it's a critical fix.
they're pretty rare. I would say maybe twice a year, maybe something like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
we aim for none of those. But they're not very frequent.
I guess one other note I had when I put to the stuff to the mailing list after last month's meeting was, can we make sure that the master branch's version number isn't ever behind the release like it was until yesterday? Where master
Yeah.
claimed to be 2.0.0 release candidate 1, and we
Yeah.
had 2.0.4 out or whatever.
So that brings up a good question. Like, what should it be now? So yeah, I put the 2.1 RC1 out yesterday. So that's available now. But that means like the master branch version, you're right, is kind of weird at the moment. And it was weird before. So like, what should it be? Do we want to tag it as 2.2 RC0 or something like that? Or 2.2 beta or
I think
2.0.99 or something, just so that it's always newer than the
Newer?
release until the next one or something?
I mean, I would like that. I've just had a hard time getting agreement or settling on like what the right thing to do is. Like every project does their own thing here, right? For what makes sense. So what makes sense for us?
I mean, the other approach, which I think Alan might have mentioned, was like just doing it based on the date, like master dash 2021 dash 4-30.
Well, you still need something in the Git version information though, right? All right. Right now, I mean, that's fine for real releases, but like when you do Git describe now, right? It says something like, well, at least until yesterday, it said something like 2.0-RC1 plus 800 patches or whatever, which is a little misleading.
Yeah, that's why I'd like, that 2.0.99 or something. Or I guess after 2.1 is out, it'd be 2.1.99 or something dash plus so many patches, something. But
is
something that's less than 2.2, but more than any 2.1 release.
Yeah.
Is the Git describe what people care about, or is it the like the version that's reported in the in dmessage, like when you
or specifically the zpool version and ZFS version commands?
Oh, I didn't even know this showed it.
Those are new-ish. And they show the version of the command line tools and the version of the Kmod.
Oh, yes, I see.
Yes.
Maybe for master, we can also have it even put G, the Git hash or something.
I think it does at the moment.
It does have the Git. So like, on my, on my system, which is based on Delphix, it says ZFS 080-Delphix plus the date dash the Git hash. And the first part, like the OAO, is just like totally wrong and useless.
Oh, okay, it shouldn't be,
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know where it's getting that from.
I think there's a file in the root called meta.
Yeah.
That it pulls it from.
Maybe we need to update that. But I guess we basically decided, like, let's just use the date, rather the date in the Git hash rather than the version number. But yeah, if we do want to include the version number, then it makes sense to have it be like 20. So you're saying it would be like 2099 or 299, 299.99,
something like that. So that it's so you can do a version comparison easily. The problem with 299.99 is that 299.99 from today is going to be older than 2.1.0 when it comes out, and so you don't want to bump the middle one until after you've released.
Oh, I see.
Right, so hence 2.0.99 until yesterday, where yesterday it would have become 2.1.99 or so. Well, it would be RC until we get the RC out, but once 2.1 is finally out, it would be 2.1.99, so that master is always newer, but won't be newer than 2.2.0 RC0 when that comes out in 6 months or whatever.
Yeah, so it's like whatever the most recent
release is,
release or release candidate is, but with a patch of 99.
Yeah, so that it always sorts as being newer. So easy to do, version comparison function that lots of package managers and so on use to tell if the version you have is newer than the version you're trying to install.
Yeah. I think there's a bunch of conventions there that we could adopt. I think most of the version managers these days are pretty smart about doing things like looking at the release fields too. So like, 2.2 beta or alpha would also be sorted lower, right? But they're maybe not the best names, or .99 is fine. It just assumes we'll never get there, which is probably true.
Yes. Well, hopefully, yeah, especially with the new criteria where we're going to try to only have to do patches infrequently, but.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we'll still do patches for the current release
Right.
with the same frequency that we have been, but that's only, a handful a year.
Yeah. So the cadence shouldn't get, I don't think we're going to get to 2.99 or whatever. We'll bump the major version before we get there, right?
Yeah.
I've seen people use .50 too. I don't have a strong preference.
Yeah, me either. Yeah.
99 stands out for me more visually.
Yeah.
But cool. Did you I mean, you sent me some write-up. Did you send that out to the team as well in an email?
No, I didn't send it out yet. I was going to ask where the best spot for that is. I could send it out to, I guess, the list, or I could send it out to, or just post it on the GitHub, or update the documentation on the website, or we could iterate on it a little bit first.
Here's an idea. Why don't you open a PR to add a file like that could be linked from the README?
Yeah.
That describes it, and that way, like, we have it, like it's in the source code. It says that this is our plan, and that way, people can like try to hold us to it but it's not just like some document on OpenZFS.org. It's like actually in the source code that says that we'll do this release, or what the release criteria are.
Yeah, we've got a lot of the documentation for the project in the repo already, so maybe there's a good spot to put it in there. Either I'll look for the right spot to put it, but yeah, I could open a pull request that adds it somewhere to the repo.
Yeah. Then that gives, developers will at least have good notice of this.
And it makes it easy to collaborate on a conversation around the wording and locking it in.
Yeah.
I guess it centralizes the conversation.
All right, I'll get a pull request open for that, and we can work through the details with my initial proposed wording. But
cool, thanks a lot, Brian. Okay.
Hello. Oh, sorry, I'm a little late. I'm Igor.
Hi, Igor.
Yes.
And
I still have a question if you have no topics for now.
We have one more topic on the agenda, and then we'll have open questions. So was your question about the release stuff or different?
Different, about
Okay.
the FSS stability and something else.
All right, cool. We'll get to that in just a minute. Okay. So the next topic was the OpenZFS conference. So this is kind of a update on the planning for you all, as opposed to a real announcement. But what we're planning right now is that the conference is going to be November 2nd through 4th. Or 2nd and 3rd. This should be 2 days. Let me just double check that to make sure. So still a ways away. November 3rd and 4th. So it'll be November 3rd and 4th, which is a Wednesday and Thursday. And it's going to be online, like we did last year. The talk submissions are going to be due at the end of August 23rd. So you have quite a while before then. So think about what work you're working on now, or that you're going to be working on in the spring and summer that you would like to talk about at the conference. I know we have some exciting stuff in the plans for Delphix, and hopefully we'll be ready to talk about it then. And I know there's been, a lot of good work since last year's conference. So, we'd love to hear from you all on what work you've done, either adding new features, improving ZFS's performance, things you've noticed about ZFS that people might not know, like how certain subsystems work, how their performance impacts your workloads, things like that, would all be great topics for the conference. And yeah, in terms of the online aspect, we got a lot of really good feedback on the conference, how we ran the conference last year. I think that people generally liked the way it went and liked that more people could be included who weren't necessarily able to travel to San Francisco. So given that we don't really know where, how comfortable people are going to be with traveling in terms of coronavirus in November, we're planning to have it be remote only. And if things change a lot, then maybe we'll reevaluate that and have it be like a hybrid. But we'll definitely have it be at least, remote first kind of plan, so that people can plan to attend or speak, even if you can't or don't think you would want to travel in November. And we'll make a an announcement on the webpage and mailing lists and stuff probably in a couple months. Any questions or comments about that?
Recording will be available.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Video recording.
Video recordings. Yep. Yeah. As with every year, we'll definitely record all the video and post that. Last year, so normally when we have it in person, we have like a professional, video recording streaming service. And last year we just used like Zoom, recording, and then like I edited the videos together. And I thought that worked pretty well. I mean, obviously the video is not like quite as good quality as, when you use professional equipment that's recording on like, I don't even know what they use, like some high bitrate medium as opposed to whatever's streaming over the internet. But it wasn't that hard to put together like the slides and video of people talking. So yeah, we'll definitely plan to do that this coming year and all years into the future. I know that's really valuable. I mean, I think that as many people, even when we do it in person, like as many people are in person, it's about 100. Like there's definitely way more than that number of people that watch the video recordings later. And I think that we actually had a lot more people streaming it live last year than we typically have streaming it live. Like the number of, in-person plus streaming was higher last year than it was in previous years, probably just because like the idea of being able to stream conferences was like more on people's minds. And also maybe people might have felt more included because it wasn't like, it's a live conference and then like, PS, you can watch it on the stream. It was like, it's a streaming conference. So, everybody has kind of equal access.
Yes,
Mark.
It's pretty very cool for history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, having all the history of all the videos that you can go back and watch from like, 5 years ago or whatever, is pretty neat. Mark, if you're talking, you're on mute.
I know I wasn't. I was muted. I think going forward, I think we really do want to think about what a hybrid model looks like, because yeah, even when it's you know, post-COVID, I think that you want to retain this ability to have more interaction from the video folks. And I think that that's a really good thing to bring to the conference.
Yeah, we've thought about doing something like having a big, you know, TV that's like on stage that, you know, people who are on the Zoom like could pop up on there, and then like, you know, during Q&A, you know, ask their question, and it would be, you know, their audio would go to everybody. I mean, we didn't even have that on the Zoom last year, but it might put, you know, to get people on an equal footing with people who are in person and can, you know, use their audio voice to ask their questions and kind of have like a little bit of a back and forth with the speaker.
Yeah.
Doing something like that could be cool.
Yeah, and I found it even worked pretty well for the hackathon stuff, even though that's a bit different.
Yeah, I think the hackathon would probably be more difficult, and I think that
Mhm.
I think that we lost like the first day, the talks. I think that doing that online, like we gave up very little in terms of the value compared to having in person. But the hackathon, I think that we do get a lot more value out of those
Mhm.
like kind of mixer type interactions where it's like, oh, like I'm here, I'm hanging out, I'm like overhearing what the like cool people are talking about, and then like getting some ideas or trying to, you know, see how I can help them out. It's a lot, you know, I felt like it was a lot harder to do that, and I only saw like a very few number of people that were like really new to the community, like glomming on to, you know, an existing project by experienced members.
Mhm.
It seemed like the hackathons last year were much more like, you know, the people who are on this call were the people who were participating in the hackathons. And ideally, we'd like to use the hackathon to bring in more people who are new to the community and connect them up with problems and people. And I think that we didn't do as good of a job at that. I think it's just a harder job to do without
Mhm.
being in person. And I'm sure we could have done better, but it turned out to not hit all of the goals of the hackathon, in my opinion.
Right.
But if you have ideas, like Alan or other folks, if you have ideas on how we could make the hackathon, like the online hackathon, better, I mean, we're going to have an online hackathon this year. That's the plan. So
Yep.
we could definitely use ideas of how to like change the format or, you know, tools to use to increase engagement among, you know, the kind of folks who aren't already like that on these kind of calls, and knowing how to, you know, do ZFS development already. Or maybe even people that do know how to do ZFS development, but they're only doing it like in their company. Maybe they haven't contributed anything upstream because they don't, you know, they're not part of the like open source ecosystem mindset. And so they aren't coming to these calls, but they're, you know, they want to learn about this tool that they're using. So they come to the conference, and then, you know, ideally we can kind of rope them into, oh yeah, like, you know, you don't have to like think about contributing like your tens of thousands of lines of code that you customize for ZFS. Just, you know, help us solve this one little thing, and to draw them into the community. I think those are some of the best kind of interactions at the hackathon. So figuring out how to engage with folks who, you know, have a lot to add but are kind of on the sidelines right now would be really wonderful.
And also maybe just a couple more things that aren't even necessarily developer focused. Like I was Mohammed from Seagate last year was just benchmarking the MinIO object storage tool on top of ZFS and trying different configurations and stuff. And there was just a group of people on a more operational side of ZFS just learning things and playing with it. And maybe, I don't know if we can come up with a couple more of those types of ideas Like we usually have a spreadsheet with a bunch of ideas, but I don't know if we can maybe
we had that
try to think about
last year as well, but it was just, I think, harder to rope folks into it because they weren't like, oh, I came for the talks in the beginning of the day, and now I'm stuck here in this room with all these people who are talking about doing hackathons. So I guess I'll kind of see what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder to.
Yeah, a different level of captive attention.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, to be fair, like for the folks who like checked out of the hackathon this year, like I'm not blaming them, like of the folks who kind of were the captive audience and then stuck around for the hackathon, like it's only a small portion of those folks that end up like making that are actually like roped into the community. It's just that, those few people can be valuable to the community, even if like 80% of the folks who were there still just kind of sat around and watched the presentations. Like that's fine. We just got to get those 20% of folks who happen to be there and then also happen to get roped in to somehow get roped in, even though it's online. Cool. So I think that was all that we had. Let me check. Yep, that's all that we had on the agenda. So now it's open Q&A time, and I think Igor, now's your time for your question, if you'd like.
Yes, I have several questions. First one is announce I have ported to DilOS L2ARC plus rebuild and generate fishes. And I have found several issues what I would like to contribute and discuss. Try to discuss about one issue with generate test tool because we are faster on DilOS instead of on Linux, and we are using for testing 4 active CPU, and we are try to up threads and more faster and eat all of RAM and swap, and we have a crashes with the tool if we try to use all available CPU on the VM. One fix for it is try to use 2 active CPU instead of all available on the VM, because we have a snowball with threads and additional threads from this tool where we try to operate with new row structure with ABD, where we try to allocate additional RAM for some testing. I will try to show what we have and how we have fixed it at this moment. It is not a full fix, probably try a workaround for next discussion. It is first one update. Additional one, we have fixed ABD related to DilOS platform because I can see a different implementation for Linux and FreeBSD, but FreeBSD version crashed under DilOS, and I have fixed it. Try to reuse of some additional ideas from Linux platform where you try to store some allocation of chunks numbers under ABD structure and try to reuse it in next places. I will try to show this issue too in some updates. And we try to add and port additional ZFS tests. And today I have opened an additional issue with ZFS export issue. It's interest issue because we have test path where we have broken a logic. We try to check a pool was exported, but pool was not imported in previous test. And we have found additional places what I would like to try to contribute specifically for DilOS platform, where we can try to split of some changes. And I have a question. At this moment, I can see some places where we can try to reuse Linux code, but can I add some define as a DilOS platform? Probably to all code, because we have some conflicts. Probably I will try to pull of some changes and we can discuss. Can we move it to separate between platforms? Or we can try to add some define for additional platform to main code. Because one code can be reused on Linux and BSD, but with our platform, we can see some inconsistency in several places. And I would like to upstream of our changes to one main base of source code. And also I try to work on additional build board where we can try to test of changes on additional platform with all OpenZFS changes. It is not possible right now because some code have many differences, but we'll try to minimize of differences between platforms and ZFS code.
Yeah, so just to make sure I understand your question is, so you have some changes in DilOS to the ZFS code, and you would like to upstream them to OpenZFS.
Right.
And so you want to add like ifdefs. There's some places in the code today where there's like ifdef Linux versus ifdef FreeBSD, and you want to add ifdef DilOS.
Yes.
So I think that, in my opinion at least, I would want to see that. So I guess first we could try to figure out like how do we remove these ifdefs for all platforms and make it more extensible, you know, naturally extensible, so that there's like, you know, instead of having ifdef Linux, it's like in a Linux header file and in a FreeBSD header file, and then you can add your own header file in your own repo that's the DilOS header file, rather than having to have the ifdefs. That would be the best solution. Sometimes that's kind of a pain.
Several files, it's the best solution, but in some main code, if we have some 1 or 2 lines in C code, we cannot split it to different places.
Yeah, it can definitely be difficult. So if that isn't possible, then I would say, in my opinion, it would be great to see the OpenZFS main repo support more platforms, including DilOS. So, you know, if that's kind of what you're working towards, then, you know, like having a big PR that's like add support for DilOS, and we're going to add, you know, build bot testing for DilOS, and we're going to, you know, add some ifdefs as necessary. I think that would be a great project. If we're not, but if we're not doing that, then I don't think it makes sense to add ifdef DilOS or other platforms that are not, you know, buildable by the main repo into the main repo. So does that make sense?
Yes, but I cannot upstream all changes by one time. what you can see for Mac OS. And I would like try to contribute partly of changes because it will be easy for review and it will be easy for discuss how to do it much more better. Instead, try to contribute all in one.
Yeah, I think doing it little bit by bit is good. It's just that I think we should leave the explicit like if def DilOS parts until the final PR.
Okay.
I think that's what was done like with FreeBSD and what's being done now with macOS is that, you know, like now, you know, Jorgen is like reorganizing some files, abstracting some things out without adding any macOS specific code into OpenZFS yet. And then he has like a big PR that will eventually add, you know, the minimum set of macOS specific ifdefs and files, you know, at the end, and that'll still be a big PR. But you know,
Yes.
he's working to minimize that by doing all the reorganization that he needs. Like I think he did a bunch of stuff in the VFS layer with like the way that, you know, the ZFS file or ZFS inode stuff is declared. So similar things like that would make sense for DilOS and other new platforms as well.
Yeah, that's exactly the approach we took for FreeBSD, and I think it worked out pretty well. I mean, we can even go as far as if there are interfaces that need to be refactored for DilOS or whatnot, like we can make those changes in the open repo so you can just drop in the code you need when it's ready. We did that for FreeBSD where we knew changes were going to be coming and it was just easier for you to add them later. But yeah, basically try to tackle all those things first and all the refactoring so it's easier to just drop it in at the end and add the ifdefs as needed or whatnot. Another thing we did in conjunction with that was update the test cases so that they could run on the other platform. So, I mean, we could bring in that kind of functionality sooner too. If we need conditionals in the test cases to do a special thing for DilOS, that's fine.
Thank you. Yes, I will try to split some of changes and propose to some updates for platform identification, because right now you try to identify a platform by your name code, but as you know, a Linux can be different, Debian, CentOS, or something else. Also, it will be tried to much more better identify some small of platform, for example, Linux Debian, Linux CentOS, FreeBSD one version, FreeBSD another version, and DilOS. We have some refactoring of platform identification where we have defined it of some external variables what we can change in tests, where we can use it on different platform with a little bit different names. And in this logic, we have split it to some of changes what I would like to provide. It is why I try to ask first how try to do it better. Try to partly of components, try to part of test cases, because it will be much more easy try to discuss of our updates for all platforms. And I would like to have all visions to integration. Also, Brian, we discussed about additional build bot where we try to recheck of some solution between Linux, BSD, and DilOS. And in this case, how DilOS is different with the Lumos right now. We are using the same of tools what is Linux use. For example, corutils, and other tools like grep, sed, avk, and other tools with the same flags. It is why DilOS as a platform will be a good in OpenZFS code, because DilOS is different in many places with original Lumos. We are using the same kernel space and some API, but we are different in tools tools locations, and right now in some libc implementation and something else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the question there was, can we add DilOS as like its own platform, right, and keep it separate from Illumos? If that's, I think that's what I got from that, and yeah, that makes sense. if it's different, it's different.
Yes, it's a different.
Especially from the test.
Yeah.
Especially from the testing, userland point of view, maybe someday there's like a Illumos, the OpenZFS repo supports Illumos and DilOS, and they both have the same kernel. They both build the kernel the same way, but they have different, because their userlands are so different, then
Yes.
maybe the test suite needs to detect them as different platforms, right?
Yes, it is why I try to propose to use a DilOS as a separate platform. Also, Illumos missed many OpenZFS features what I have ported to DilOS, where we can try to test and try to find additional issues on DilOS, because we are faster in threads than others, and additional platform can show, we try to find out additional issues, and we are all wants to see ZFS a much more better and stable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There are all updates on my side, and I see, Matt, of your updates with Ready expansion.
Yeah, I've been continuing to work on RAID expansion the past month, not so much, but a bunch before that, and I do hope to finish it up very soon. It's basically all working. I'm going through and doing like code cleanup, upstreaming some things that were not kind of core to RAID expansion, which you probably saw in the past month, and those all went in. So now I think the next steps for me are like continuing code cleanup, writing up documentation, writing up the design, like the design document to reflect the actual implementation, and then I'll be opening a final PR. So that will be coming very soon.
Okay, and we have found some additional issue with OpenZFS testing, because right now we are all trying to operate with isolated environment and the VM. What I mean, we are using hard drives provided only to one VM. I tried to test ZFS tests on the hardware. One JBOD with two different servers, physical servers, where we can see a shared drives between servers. And OpenZFS tests was failed because several tests are failed with import-export, because we can see another drives with the same pool, but we provides only 3 drives to one server, but we can see all drives from JBOD. It is the issue with test framework. What I would like to discuss, we have some proposed and fixes for it. And for you all, we try to use ZFS tests not on the VM only. We try to test it on the hardware too. And we have some interesting results. One issue, we are not ready to use 4K drives. We have to work on the ZFS test framework. We can use only old 520 bytes of sector size. And another issue with shared drives, we have to limit to use only defined drives on the server. and not to use all available drives on the server. Try to filter out some of changes. And another one, it is how much CPU we can use on the VM, because on different platforms, we see some limitation of threads, and something of tools can be crashed, and crash of the system.
Yeah, those all sound like interesting and good issues with the test suite. You know, and all good stuff to fix. Personally, the first few issues that you talked about that were not specifically related to the test suite, but to misbehavior of ZFS more generally, those I'm most interested in, since those would apply to people using ZFS as well as people as opposed to just issues with how how we can run the tests. The required test environment is being more restrictive than it needs to be. So yeah, if you can share details on those in issue reports, then that'll be helpful.
Yes, I will try to upstream our changes. And
okay, great.
Another, I will show where we are not available for all changes. And also additional issue, it is on DilOS, we are using a native ZFS modeler in kernel. It means we have a bootable system with ZFS and another tests and another pool with changes in global variables. And there are global variables can impact our pool and data sets, what we try to use for additional artifacts.
Cool. Igor, I have one more question from someone else here, so I'd like to give time for other folks to ask questions as well. But thanks a lot for those. That sounds like you've encountered a lot of different issues and fixed a lot of them. So we definitely look forward to seeing the issue reports and PRs from that.
Yeah. Yes.
Cool. And feel free to ping me if you have other questions that I can help answer after the meeting. It sounds like Alan had one more question that he wanted to discuss.
Yeah, like so when you do ZFS destroy -v for say a range of snapshots, or -r-v, the V does two different things. It prints out the list of snapshots that will destroy, which can be useful with the no-op flag, but right now it also calculates how much space you'll reclaim from that. Sometimes you only want the list of snapshots, which can be calculated rather quickly, but calculating how much space those snapshots uses can take a long time when you have a very large number of snapshots. So I was wondering if it made sense to add an extra flag to ZFS destroy, like name only or no space or something to that effect, to make the verbose mode print out the list of snapshots that will be destroyed or will be destroyed, but not do the space calculation. Like I don't want to change the default because people are used to it, but a way to opt out of that to make it faster is an issue I've been encountering where in systems with very large numbers of snapshots, sometimes way more than there should be, that trying to destroy some of those snapshots can take an excruciatingly long time.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We should probably think about how we want to express that on the command line. It occurs to me that maybe we could take a page from the other commands that like list columns and have like a column selection mode for this, where it's like, oh, like if I selected to only the name column and not the size column or whatever, then
right now there's only one size for the whole range. We don't actually calculate the size for each individual one.
Yeah, that's right.
Probably because that would be even slower.
Well, also it doesn't make sense because you have space that's across multiple snapshots, which is the whole point of doing this space calculation.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
But that
it's
is
not exactly
I like
the same.
that approach, but
Yeah, I mean, we could kind of shoehorn it into fit where it's like you doing the -O field kind of notation, even though it isn't actual columns,
Right.
to select what is being output.
Yeah, and I didn't know if it made sense to even just to word it as, you know, name only. I'm only asking for the names, or if I'm specifically saying I want to disable the
Excluding,
space.
yeah,
in my, you know, in my
it's annoying
narrowing
because
it down.
I mean
or
those are the
excluding
only
things.
two things that are displayed today, right?
Right.
It's just
But
name and
we
space.
might
But
add one at some point, and it would,
yeah,
which way around makes more sense is, you
yeah,
know, or the other option is to make a long up like -- verbose equals in a comma separated list of what things you want to be verbose about. But
yeah, which is kind of similar to the like -O field,
yeah,
comma field,
exactly.
even though it isn't literally
And you know, which of
columns.
those feels better? Because it's not columns and -O is mostly for columns. Does the verbose one feel better?
Yeah,
But you know, yeah.
that's a good question.
And all that also ties back to a slightly older PR that I just refreshed to improve the performance of ZFS list on when you only ask for specific columns. If those columns don't actually require opening the snapshot dataset or the dataset itself, then they can be a lot faster. Like if you
Great.
have 40,000 snapshots, it can be the difference between 3 seconds and 30 minutes to
Yeah,
do a
believe it.
ZFS list -T all or whatever.
Yeah,
And in particular, if we'd want to change the defaults for some of these things, like ZFS destroy, currently I think is sorted by the creation time. And if we instead sorted by the created transaction group, which is basically equivalent, but is a transaction number instead of a timestamp, then the sort becomes a simple instead of or the list becomes a simple instead of the complex one. And so we don't open every data set. And if you're not doing the space calculation, that means the ZFS destroy would become, you know, some number of 100% faster.
yeah, that sounds great.
Many improvements in performance will be very well.
Yeah, especially on hard drive based pools. You know, the pool I'm running into the problem with is a petabyte of 12 terabyte drives and has
if we have
way too many
petabyte or
functions.
several petabytes of pools, yes, we have improvements of performance will be very cool.
Yeah,
so I've refreshed the list speed up one, and yeah, we'll have to figure out what we want to do for the destroy controlling the verbosity.
Yeah, on that one, I was thinking maybe having it be like a new flag that's like list names, because it's you think of it like really what we're trying to like. You're probably using this in a more or less scripted way.
Not in this case, but yes. So I think like
kind of treating it as like a special
separate
case
flag.
Yeah, where it's like -V is like, hey, like
all of them.
I'm just a human. Give me some info. You know, I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. And then having a special flag that's maybe a long op, like, you know, ZFS destroy --list -names. That's like, I know that I just want this specific thing, which is the names of the snapshots that are going to be deleted.
Because I can see from a scripting case where you'd want only the other way around. I only want the amount of space that's going to be reclaimed with the -P flag too. And I don't actually need the list of all the snapshots. That's just a bunch of output I have to ignore.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe decomposing it and having new flags for each one, and then you can just use those instead of -V.
Yeah, like having a --list -names, and then also having a like --total -space.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Anyways, we're at our 1 hour. Actually, I have another meeting to go to. So thank you, everyone. And we'll see you in 4 weeks at the later time. 4 weeks is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, the 27th.
I think try to add additional meeting in the same time as right now will be much more better. Or I will wait much more time for next meeting.
Yeah. Feel free to send us your, you know, if you have updates, send them on the mailing list, or add them to the meeting notes, and we can, you know, if you have like PRs that you want to bring people's attention to, we can do that, even if you aren't able to attend.
Oh, thank you. I will try to find out how to manage it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. All right. See you all in 4 weeks.
Thanks, everyone.